Hi students, today I would like to go through a very important feature of personal recount known as the connectors of sequence and contrast. Before we delve deeper into this topic, allow me to ask you this question. Can you recall what is a personal recount? Yes, you are right. A personal recount involves you retelling an experience or an event that had happened in the past. Next, let's revisit the organization of personal recount. This can be found in your VAP book, page 342. Right. The organization actually mainly is divided into three different components known as the introduction or orientation, whereby you need to include who was involved, what are the main experience did the first person narrator go through, where and when did the experience take place, why or how did that experience change the first person narrator. Next, you have to write the body paragraph in a chronological order, alright, as the event takes place. And lastly, for your conclusion, you need to write a comment, whereby you need to jot down or write down what are your thoughts, reactions, and feelings the first person narrator have about the events. Right, in the previous unit, Growing Up, we learned a few features of personal recounts. Can you recall them? Good. One of them is first person pronouns, the use of adjectives, yes, the use of connectors, the use of action and mental verbs, and lastly, the use of simple past tense. In fact, for your information, there are two other features that can be used in personal recounts, and they are as follows. I would like to introduce you to the two other features that you can use in personal recount. And there are noun post modifiers and connectors. Alright, so basically what is noun post modifiers? Okay, they actually provide additional information about the people, places, and things. Now let's look at the example given. The book on the table. Alright, it's referring to that particular book which is on the table and not any other book. As for the second example, civil conflict in Africa. Okay, this shows that it is only talking about the conflict that is happening not anywhere else but only in Africa. Right. Next, the next feature that we will be going through today is the connectors. Basically, connectors are used to show chronological and relationships between ideas. A text with connectors is easy to understand because its parts are connected in a clear manner. Right. For the purpose of this lesson, I would like to discuss in depth about one of the features which is connectors of sequence. You may ask, what exactly is connectors of sequence? Yes, it tells us the order in which the actions or events happen, and in fact, there are a series of connectors that we can use to build chronological sequence of events and actions. Right. Let's do a bit of reading right now. I would like you to start off by reading a short passage. Let's read the passage together. This was what happened. I was cycling towards the park when rain began falling. I paddled towards the nearest shelter. I took off my drenched jacket. I called home to say I would be late. I sat down and began to daydream. I began to doze off from watching the rain. The sky began to clear. I hopped on my bicycle and began my journey home. The park would be dry again. So what do you think of this passage? Were you able to understand the entire passage fully or partially? And perhaps you may want to think why or why not you are thinking that way. Is there actually something missing in this passage? Yes. As a matter of fact, you will realize that all the sequence connectors are being left out in this passage. And so, to a certain extent, we are uncertain if the action happened before or after another action. Now, let's read the same passage again, but this time with all the sequence connectors being included. Let's read this together once more. This was what happened. In the middle of the day, I was cycling towards the park when rain began falling. Immediately, I paddled towards the nearest shelter. Once there, I took off my drenched jacket. I called home to say I would be late. Then, I sat down and began to daydream. In the end, I began to doze off from watching the rain. After a long time, the sky began to clear. I hopped on my bicycle and began my journey home. By this time tomorrow, the park would be dry again. Right. What do you think of the passage this time? Is it much clearer in terms of the order of the actions and the events that is happening? Alright, let's look at it more closely. Alright, so basically you will notice the use of connectors of sequence, like I mentioned earlier. Alright, and they are made up of adverbs such as yesterday, immediately, then. Okay, the next connectors of sequence is the adverb phrases of time, okay, whereby you can see that, there's words such as once there, after a long time, by this time tomorrow. And lastly, the use of prepositional phrases such as in the middle of the day and in the end. So do realize, okay, that these words and phrases that I've just mentioned give us time-related information and also tells us whether an action happened before or after another action, and therefore they are known as adverbials of time. Right, for everyone's information, adverbials of time tells us three things. Okay, they tell us the duration, the frequency, as well as time. Alright, so the adjectives that we can use for each of these type, okay, are seen as in the table. Alright, for instance, for adverbs duration, we can use words like forever, permanently, briefly, temporarily. Okay, as for adverb phrases, okay, which contain more than one word, we can use phrases like since 1965, ever since July. Okay, for prepositional phrases, okay, because it starts with a preposition. For example, for this case, it's for a full day, for a year. And also there are other phrase types like all day. Okay, for frequency, in terms of adverbs, these are the words that you can use, okay, to describe sequence connectors, right? So words like rarely, frequently, often, always, seldom, weekly, and daily. As for adverb phrases, we can use words like very often, almost daily, practically, annually, once a month, once in a while. For prepositional phrases, you use of from, and so you can use phrases like from time to time. Okay, other phrases for frequency includes every century, alright, means every 100 years. Several times a day, every now and then. Lastly, for time, to indicate time, adverbs that we can use include yesterday, today, tomorrow, later. As for adverb phrases, next year, after next year, or next week. Preposition phrases, in, which is the preposition, so we can say some things like in the afternoon or in the morning. And lastly, all of a sudden. So hence, to make sure, okay, that you use the appropriate adverbials of time in your personal recount writing. Okay? Right. Next, adverbials of time can also appear at different positions in a sentence, as you can see right here at the table below. Alright, so it can actually appear at the start of a sentence. For instance, all of a sudden, the whole room went deathly quiet. Adverbials of time can also be used in the middle of the sentence. For instance, give me a call once in a while when you have left the country. Okay? And of course, it can also be used at the end of the sentence. For example, I usually go for a jog every morning or every evening. Now, let's look at the coordinating and subordinating conjunctions as well as conjunctive adverbs. Okay, so basically these two types of adverbs are used to show contrast, okay, to show contrast, but they are which are linked but different in nature. Alright, so basically, if you look at the table that I have right now in front of you, okay, you can use words like conjunctions like but, although, though, even though, while, whereas. So these are known as conjunctions in short. Okay, as for conjunctive adverbs, you can use words like however, nevertheless, nonetheless, instead, and on the contrary. Okay? Right. For connectors of contrast, right? Okay, there are actually 5 rules that all of you need to take note of. Do you know all the rules? If you can't, it's okay, because I'm going to share them with you in this lesson. Right, so rule number 1. Remember to always use a comma if the two parts of the phrase or sentence are joined by but can stand on its own as a complete sentence. Okay, let me explain this a little bit more in detail. So for instance, this sentence given to you, that doctor is inexperienced, comma, but he's careful and well trained. Alright, so if you noticed, why we put a comma in this sentence is because by itself, the doctor is inexperienced is actually a complete sentence by itself. And if you look at the second part of the sentence, he is careful and well trained. This can be also a proper sentence by itself. So basically, these two complete sentences are joined up by the word but. Okay, and therefore you need to place the comma in between. But most of the time, okay, in our writing, okay, we do not write it this way. In fact, most of us write like what you see in the next sentence. Okay, that doctor is inexperienced but careful and well trained. So most of the time we will drop the second pronoun. Okay, let's look at one more example. Stress is uncomfortable. So this is a proper sentence, a complete sentence by itself. And then you have the second half of the sentence. Most people agree that it is helpful. It's also a complete sentence by itself. And since both are a complete sentence by itself, you need to place the comma and use the contrasting verb known as but. Okay? So, of course, you can also write it as stress is uncomfortable but helpful. Right, let's continue with rule number 2. Use subordinating conjunctions to show the contrast between the two clauses. Alright, so before I share 2 examples, or rather 3 examples with you regarding this rule, perhaps some of you may not know the meaning of clauses. Alright, let's double check with one another so that you are crystal clear of the examples that will be shared later. Alright, so basically clauses are a group of words. Okay, it's a group of words that includes a subject and predicate, okay, to form only part of a sentence or just a simple sentence. Okay, are you clearer now? Right, let's look at example 1. Although I asked many times, she just ignored me. Okay, so I asked many times is a positive action, which is a good thing. Okay, but the actual feedback is she ignored me. Alright, which is quite negative. Alright, so when you want to show a contrast like this, you add a adverb here to show the contrast. Alright, let's look at example 2. While John was seen as a potential team captain, his twin brother Larry was never in the running. So one to show that he's good in sports, while the other one was never even interested in sports. Example 3. He practiced very hard, even though everyone thought he was going to win. Alright, so it means that he didn't take things for granted. Although he knew that there's a possibility that he will win the medal, he still put in his best effort every single day. Alright, let's move on to rule number 3. Okay, so rule number 3 says, use the semicolon to link, alright, so this is semicolon, to link 2 clauses which show contrasts when conjunctive adverbs are used. Alright, sounds a little bit complicated, but let's look at example. He had fallen sick the night before. Nonetheless, he chose to run in the race. So, can you see the placement of the semicolon? It's right here. Okay, so it's always before the use of the contrast, connectors of contrast. Okay. Example 2. Everyone believed that Sam was asleep. Semicolon. On the contrary, he was staying up all night working on his project. Okay, again, we use the connectors of contrast here. on the contrary. Okay, to link two very different clauses. Lastly, example 3. The police thought the robber had escaped. Instead, he was still in his hideout. So, similar rule, placement of semicolon before the connectors of contrast. Okay? Right. Rule number 4. Use of conjunctive adverbs to show the contrast between two sentences. Okay, so example 1. It looked like there was no hope of victory. Nonetheless, the soldiers refused to cave in. Alright, so the conjunctive this one is to show the contrast. No hope, refused. Example 2. The captain had started the journey full of confidence. However, his ship was soon sink into the ocean. So, confidence, sink. Alright, so there's a contrast issues there. Idea. And lastly, example 3. Everyone expected an angry outburst. Instead, she simply smiled and walked away. So we have angry outbursts as opposed to smiled. Okay? Right, let's move on to the last rule. Rule number 5. Use comparative adverbs to show contrast between two groups of sentences or even two paragraphs. So if you look at the table here on top, okay, so between sentences, okay, we had bought the new printer thinking it would solve all our problems. It had the newest functions. The price tag suggested it was a top-of-the-line product. However, we were soon proven wrong. Nothing worked. So we have words like new, newest function, top-of-the-line product. Okay, these are all positive, right, to describe the printer, but unfortunately, okay, and therefore we use the comparative adverb however to show that nothing worked, unfortunately. Okay, so this one is contrast between two groups of sentences. Okay, you can also use comparative adverbs, okay, in between paragraphs, as you can see here at the bottom. Okay, so if you read the first paragraph on your right, that night the scouting party set off in high hopes. They felt that they would soon find their enemy, estimate their numbers, and return to camp. After all, there didn't seem to be much danger involved. It was their country, their forest, and in Captain Chambers they had perhaps someone who had never failed a mission. They held all the aces. On the contrary, they were embarking on what would turn out to be the most dangerous mission they had ever taken on. The enemy was led by Major Samuel Salkins, himself a former scout who knew the tricks of the trade. So, as you can see here, you can actually use a comparative adverbs at the beginning of a new paragraph to show opposing points to the previous paragraph. Is everyone clear? Right, it's time to do some writing. Okay, so I've prepared a few practices that we should do right now. So basically, you are required to complete Task A and Task B on your VAP book. Alright, and they're actually found on page 356. Okay, so while you're doing this task A and Task B, I expect you to pause this video, alright, and you are only to click play or continue with this video once you are done with all your answers. Okay, I hope my instruction is clear. Oh yes, do remember to mark your answers later on using a green pen. Okay? Right, welcome back. I hope you have done all the exercises which is found in task A and task B, and they're not too tough. Okay, I'll be going through the answers now with all of you. Okay, for task A, let's look at the suggested answers for question 1. Right, basically you are supposed to rearrange the connectors so that they are in the correct order. Alright, so let's check your answers now. So the question says, often he does not exercise apart from runs around the neighborhood. So the correct answer should be, he often does not exercise apart from runs around the neighborhood. Did you get that correct? If yes, give yourself a pat on the shoulder. Well done. So this is an error where the placement should be after the word pronoun. Alright? Okay, so this is what you can see. Okay, so rule number 1 is you normally place the adverbs before after a pronoun. Okay? Right, let's look at question 2. I delay brushing up on my Mandarin always, in spite of my sincere wish to improve it. So what's wrong with this sentence? Yep, you should always place your adverb before a verb. So delay is the verb. Okay, so you should place your adverb before a verb. So your answer should be, I always delay brushing up on my Mandarin in spite of my sincere wish to improve it. Did you get this right? Right, let's move on to question 3 now. Even though we have not connected in years, we bothered never to find out more about our cousins in Indonesia. So again, here the adverb should be placed before a verb. So the correct answer should be, even though we had connected in years, we never bothered, okay, to find out more about our cousins in Indonesia. So bothered is the verb, okay, and never would be the adverb. Okay? Right, let's move on to task B now. Okay? And these are the suggested answers. Alright, the first question or the first sentence, I love sharing about my favorite food places often. So the placement of the adverb is wrongly placed. So the correction should be, I often love sharing. Did you get this right? Okay, as for the second sentence, as I daily explore the different hawker, I explore daily the different hawker. Okay, the third sentence, there are no errors. As for the fourth sentence, okay, we should place the adverbial phrase, okay, in front rather than at the back. So about them and the food they sell once a week at least. So once a week at least about them. Okay, so it should come before. Alright? Okay, the next sentence. Always I am shocked by how my readers regularly read. So again, the adverb always should come after the verb, which is am. Okay, so I'm always shocked. Get it? Okay, for number 6, there are no errors. For number 7, the wrong usage of the word however, okay, because you're talking about enthusiastic audience, which is supposed to be a positive thing, okay, and if you notice the second part, encourages me to explore more cuisines and blog even better. So alright, it's the same idea, positive ideas. So words that can be used to replace the word however. Words are acceptable includes always, frequently, or often. And as for the last question, number 8, there are no errors. So how well did you do? Did you manage to get all of them correctly? Right. Before I end our lesson today, I would like to reiterate that all the features learned today and also in Unit 2 are important in personal recount, writing, and therefore you should use them appropriately in your upcoming writing assignment. Alright, with that, I would like to thank you for your attention and you have a good day ahead. Bye.